Hey, thanks again for joining me on another episode of Bound for Bestseller. I'm here with Jeff Kildow, and he is a great mind that has been working on some really fun books. And I'm really excited to have him share a little bit about what he's working on, his process. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So, Jeff, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So now I'm curious. Well, I know a little bit about what you write about, but why don't you tell those listening what your writing is about and a little bit about how you got to writing this kind of unique genre that uh, not many people write in this genre.
That's true. This genre is called alternative history. What it is a variation on a theme that you see with ordinary fictional history. In cases like that, you'll have a real situation, let's say some battle in World War II, and you want to examine and explore what's going on behind the scenes. So you create a fictional character who listens in on, say, Admiral Nimitz as he's planning the next attack, and but you don't affect anything that actually happened. The difference in alternative history is the stream of history is going along, and I pick a point called the point of departure,
Hmm.
where my imagination takes over. If I do it properly, you won't even notice, and then I take off and go from there. I still don't change the underlying facts of the history. There are those in alternate history that go off into science fiction stuff. I don't do that. So everything that I do is within the technology of the day, for example, and the understanding. So nobody has this great, God view of the world or anything. They're still stuck like they were at the time, but things go a little bit different. Uh, for example, in Nazi Menace, I include a section right in the front where there's a actual German general called General Weaver, who was the only proponent of long range bombers for Nazi Germany. This was in the 30s.
Mm.
And like any bureaucracy, any idea has to have a sponsor. And he was a very powerful sponsor. Unfortunately, he made an arrogant mistake. He took off in an airplane without properly checking it, crashed, and was killed. That's real life. In my story, he's only injured. And so
Oh,
he
okay.
survives to promote this idea, which sets the stage for what happens in Nazi Menace.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So your alternative history is all centered around World War II era stories, a lot having to do with Nazis, correct?
This first book, yes.
Okay.
In the later books, the second book, which is Red Menace, takes place against the background of the Korean War.
Okay.
And the third book, it takes place during the time of the 1956 Suez Canal crisis, which was really a war.
Wow.
So there's similar characters that go from one section to another because it is a series,
Hmm.
uh, but in three different eras.
Wow. And when you're writing these, I mean, you've obviously got to have an interest in history at large. I mean, is that a
Yeah,
pretty big piece of just your personality in general? Is that you just soak up history? And tell me a little bit about the research
absolutely.
process as you're
Uh,
preparing to write these creative stories.
I think the research is almost as fun as the actual writing. Yes, in order to do an alternative history, in my opinion, you have to understand what actually happened. I think that sounds basic.
Yeah, it sounds
And so,
foundational. Makes a lot of sense.
yeah, in each case, then for each of these three stories, I did exactly that. Uh, I have a pretty extensive library on World War II because it's long been an interest of mine. So I was able to explore that really well. I had several books on the Korean War, so I could set the background for that. And similarly for the Suez Crisis time period, I had a number of books about that. So I was able to set the pieces in place, and then I can put my characters in there and go with the story.
Yeah. Wow. Now, you have a military background, and
That's right.
and you're professionally, you have the professional experience alongside the military that I think gives some insight that your research was already maybe already halfway down the field, right? Like you were already close to the touchdown because you have had this extensive history just in your professional career. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. I served in the Air Force for 4 years, from 1962 to 1966. I was a missile maintenance technician enlisted on a missile that nobody knows anything about anymore. It was called the GAM 77 Home Dog. It was actually an early cruise missile, but it was nuclear equipped, which puts it in a slightly different category. Based on my military service, I was eligible for VA assistance for college. And so I attended Northrop University in Southern California, where I earned a degree in aerospace engineering. And just as an aside, because I love this thought, I actually took my I actually took my uh, graduation certificate from Dr. Jack Northrop, who is one of like 5 or 6 aviation pioneers.
Wow.
Pretty pretty cool.
That's pretty fun.
And
I think it's fun that you've taken a very not cookie cutter, but very kind of textbook left brain type of job being in engineering. And now you're in very right brain, creative writing. You've taken like this earlier career of yours has informed what you're doing now. I think that's a really fun way you've kind of melded that all together. Have you noticed along the way, seeing like, oh yeah, I have these creative inklings, even though I'm doing these formulas and it's very systematic and process driven years and years and years ago. Do you see that? Did you see that kind of the seeds growing, if you will, for your creative
yeah,
writing?
yeah, yeah, yes, I did. And I've had some friends comment on it. Just exactly what you said. An engineer that can write? What? that's that's kind of strange.
Yeah.
But yes, once I got into the mode, I get to where I pay attention to people, for example. And
Mm.
you see in my pocket, I have a card. Through I have cards. I make notes on people I see because you never know when you're going to need a character. You know,
Yes.
and
Oh.
I like to pay attention to situational stuff like uh, description of what a town might look like, you know, in the era that I'm writing about. And
Hmm.
gosh, with the internet these days, you can find just about anything you want.
Yeah.
So I take advantage of that and try to say, okay, now this is what this might have looked like back then.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I love that because I think our world in general, people tend to just think, "Oh, well, this is the box that I'm in, and so I have to play in that box. I'm an engineer. I need to do only these very systematic, formulaic types of things." And I know many engineers who fit that mold, and I could not imagine them doing any sort of creative writing. But as someone who has, well, my original degree was in architecture, which is very similar in the sense that there's a lot of systematic mathematical formulas. But what I was surprised by when I started that degree was at the first couple of years, I would say the first 40% of the degree was heavily focused on art classes. And I did not expect that. And a lot of people
Hmm.
were kind of surprised by that, because it was that art foundation that ultimately pivoted me over into the marketing space. Um,
I see.
and so I didn't realize going in that architecture was such a combination of left brain and right brain. So it's interesting just when you see somebody kind of breaking the mold of what kind of our world stereotypes are of like, oh, you're an engineer, you wouldn't write a creative fiction novel. Um, but I think it's amazing, and I love that you have just this foundational knowledge of all of the technical ins and outs of weaponry, of missiles, of just the way the military operates. That myself, having never served in the military, I would have to do even more research just to get to know to your base level knowledge of you just knowing, well, this is how we talk to our superiors in a meeting, or this is how we operate in XYZ scenario. That kind of stuff, I would imagine, came very intuitive to you, and
Yes.
made makes this direction of kind of these war themed scenarios for alternative history. It makes perfect sense. I see the progression, and it's really fun to
Mhm.
watch. So tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about when did you write your first book? When did that writing part of your career here really kind of establish itself as a more prominent piece of your life versus maybe just something you've been dreaming about?
Okay, easy. I started writing for my own amusement when I was in junior high.
Nice.
Ne- Never got published, thankfully. I've seen some of what I wrote, and it's ridiculous.
It's
But
fun to
it
look back
was
at that stuff, isn't it?
it was a start. What actually kicked me off, and I love to tell this story. I read all the time, all the time, and I had about 2002 somewhere in there. I was reading some paperback, supposed to be a thriller, and I was so disgusted with it, I literally threw it in the corner
Mm.
and said, "I could write better than that." Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. There
So
you
that
go.
was my challenge. And I started writing, and I had put together something on the order of 30,000 words in what eventually came my first novel. And then I went to a writers conference. And when I came home, I humbly threw away 20,000 plus words of
Oh my
that and started
goodness.
over. It was so I learned quite a bit. And so I had actually started this before I retired from engineering.
Mm.
And the total time to develop the first book was about 6 years.
Okay.
A lot of that was the technical side of it, which most readers are just going to gloss right over. But I had to satisfy myself as an engineer that
Yeah.
what I was saying was feasible.
Yeah.
So I finally did that.
Yeah. I think we all kind of get hung up over different spots of the process. I mean, I have a book I've been working on for at least 4 years. It's, sometimes some of the things take time. I think perfection can sometimes get in the way of authors. And it sounds like
Yes.
that might have been the case for you of just wanting to make sure you had all the details perfect. Um, I think imposter syndrome is another big one that kind of creeps up. And you might have I know some folks who pretty much have a whole book written, and it's just sitting on their cloud drive on their computer. Will the world ever see it? Who knows? It takes a lot to put yourself out there with a book. So what's one of the things that you've learned along the way as you've worked on these multiple books? And um, do you have any advice for people that are thinking about writing their own book, whether fiction or non or whatever? Do you have any advice?
I guess the first thing I would say is do your homework. Uh,
Mm,
if you're going to set your story in time and a place that's not today, you need to be very careful to examine that carefully and understand what motivations people had. Even speech patterns have
mm,
changed over the years.
yeah.
Uh, and when I was researching for my first book, much of which, by the way, since even though it's a World War II story, most of it takes place in the United States, that was a problem I created for myself without realizing it, because there's not very much written about what it
Yeah.
was like stateside during the war.
Right.
And I'll give you an example of the kind of fun stuff that I found. When the war started, the government confiscated or purchased actually all the supplies of silk all across the country
Oh,
for
interesting.
parachutes, and you'd be surprised how many different uses the military has for silk.
Oh, interesting.
So that that dried up the market for young ladies who were looking to be married. So I love to pose the question: what do you suppose young ladies did for wedding gown material
Hmm.
when there was no silk?
Is that what drove satin to be more popular? I don't know.
Satin
Or is
satin
satin
was there, but
considered?
not that much. It was that was considered a luxury,
Okay.
really. So I'm talking about, the ordinary everyday lady. The answer to the question is surprisingly rayon,
Oh,
because
really?
rayon is made from cellulose, which is corn
Oh,
cobs and
yeah.
anything that's. And I had the opportunity to interview some people in the little town where my story is set, which
Yeah.
was great fun. And they told me that during the war, anytime any one of the three stores in town to handle fabric got any white rayon, there'd be
Uh-huh.
a line around the block.
Oh, how
Even girls that
fun.
weren't even engaged yet,
Just to be
they
ready.
just to be ready.
Oh my goodness.
That's
What
the
a
kind of
fun
fun stuff
random
that,
fact I
yeah,
never would have thought about.
and that's in the story. It's
Wow.
subtle, but it's there.
Yeah.
Very
Oh,
satisfying to come up with something like that.
yeah. Wow. That's really fun. Now, you mentioned you carry around like a little 3x5 card and you take notes on people and
Yes.
now I'm a little nervous. I'm like, what notes is he making about me here? Am I going to be a character in his book? But I do think
You
it's an
never know.
you never know. But at the same time, we all have these fancy little devices
Yes.
in our pocket that have a notes feature that, you could just as easily do the same thing digitally. So I won't be weirded out that you're potentially taking notes about me on three. Um, but
Don't be.
I'm no. But it is an interesting practice, and I think it's a good one of just kind of being aware wherever
Mhm.
you are around some of the social situations, the interactions, just kind of the people watching, if you will,
Mhm.
to help you develop some characters. Are there any other things you've done that have helped you write fiction specifically, um, that have helped you kind of ideate and come up with some creative ideas or help you work through plot stories and some of that development? Are there any other practices you have that have helped you out as you write fiction?
Yes. I had, after my experience with that first attempt at writing a novel, I had to really step back and look at what I was creating in my characters, most of which were a reflection of myself. And that's
Mm,
common in beginning writers. So you have to make sure that you understand that, number one. Number two, you want to differentiate your characters to the degree that the reader understands that and can carry it forward.
yeah.
Now, I made a major mistake in my first novel, which was, once I got the novel going, I separated my protagonist and antagonist by the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh,
Well, kind of hard to have a hard time, between them to develop
right.
anything. So I really studied that. And remember, now this takes place during World War II, and I'm dealing with Nazis.
Yeah.
So my idea was, what is the antithesis of the ideal Nazi man? And you have an image in your mind, I can tell right now,
Yeah.
of what that,
I've seen a few World
tall.
War II movies. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I got
So
some
you
ideas.
understand what that is. So the antithesis of that in my mind was a brilliant dwarf. Not only that, he's crippled.
Mm,
And because he has two PhDs and has all these creative solutions to German problems, they have to tolerate him. And so he gets to poke the bad guy often. And I like that character so much he's in all three books.
oh, nice. You couldn't get rid of him.
I couldn't. He's too good, too fun to write.
Have you ever had that dilemma of just having to possibly kill your darling, if you will, of a character you really love, and it's like, nope, the story, like they have to die. Have you had that emotional connection to your characters over time?
Yes, yes, I have. While I was developing this first book, a good friend of mine who is a well-published author, he and I used to sit down once a week over breakfast and read to the other guy what we had written during that week.
Mm.
And in this one week, Mike sat back and looked at me and said, "You know something, Jeff? You're too gentle with your characters, and you have too many of them."
Oh, interesting.
Oh, I had to step back and look at, yeah, he was absolutely right. But killing off several of them, which, that hurts. You spend the time and everything. I actually write a small biography for each of my important characters, by the way.
Well, that's a
So I
smart
can,
idea.
as I'm going through, I can go back and say, oh, this doesn't fit. What I had in
Mm,
mind doesn't fit his or her character.
yeah.
So yes, I had to kill off several of my favorite characters, and that hurt, but it actually helped the story.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I myself, I've only focused on nonfiction writing. That's been my
Mhm.
my main space. So whenever I work with people in the fiction space, or I've got some friends that write different types of fiction, it's so interesting to hear just some of the almost friendship and relationship that you build with characters, and just how complex that is. It's not just documenting out a story. You think, oh, it'll be fine, you're just making something up. But for it to make sense and for it to all work together in this made up scenario and environment is a completely different animal. So I really applaud you for that.
Well, you left out one important aspect too.
Yeah.
In your story, you have to have a character arc,
Hmm.
and that's not just for the primary characters.
Yeah.
Generally speaking,
Right.
if you have a character that lasts very long in the story, there's an arc there as well.
Yeah.
In a work I'm working on right now, this is very much an experiment. We'll see what happens. I have one character with a reverse arc.
Oh, interesting.
He starts out as somebody that you could admire,
Uh huh.
and in the end, he's despicable. And that contrasts against the hero, which is
Yeah.
opposite, of course. So it's kind of tough to write, but it's kind of fun too.
Yeah. A nice challenge there.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So, what's your writing practice? Do you have any sort of do you write every day? How do you get down to working on things? Does it come in cycles, seasons? What does
I
that
tend to go in bursts. I'll I write stuff in my brain night
Mhm.
after night after night, and then finally, when I can't stand it any longer, I'll go jump on the computer. Next thing I know, I've spent 5 or 6 hours banging away on the keyboard. But that really does help because whatever I'm trying to work through is pretty well mature by the time I actually sit down.
Yeah.
And I found that that's more useful than trying to dream it up as I'm typing.
Yeah. Got it. Wow. I love that. So many people have different personality styles of like what works, what doesn't, and all of that. So, and I can imagine forcing yourself to write creative writing every single day and for it to all flow and make sense. Some days you're just probably not feeling it, right? So
That's right.
you
Yeah,
got to go where when you got the mojo, right?
exactly. And life interferes. You never know what's
Yeah.
going to happen. So some
Yeah.
days you just simply can't. And other days, I make sure nothing else is happening and
So you can write.
sequester myself and bang away. Yes.
Oh, days like that are in my case, nights like that are so fun. I've got little
Yes.
kids, so I don't have the luxury
Yes.
of saying like, okay, all day I'm just gonna go to a cabin and write all day long. It's more one of those things where it's like, oh, I got the evening free and the
Yep.
inspiration is hitting me. I busted out easily 10,000 words in one night
Yep. I've done that.
when the inspiration has hit. So well,
That's great.
yeah. Okay, so if you were to be talking to a newer writer who's looking to do alternative fiction, what advice would you have for them to just as they're getting started and want to get to the point where you're at with, a few books already completed, you got more in the works. What advice would you have?
Well, I think I go back to what I said earlier. Make sure that you understand the history of the time that you're writing about,
Yeah.
and watch out for movie cliches because they'll trip you up. You can't you can't
What's a
trust what you
cliche?
see in a lot of the movies that purport to be historical because they do what's easy, not what's correct. So
Yeah,
depends. Now it depends too on what variation of alternative history that somebody's working on,
sure.
because there are cases where you can do that and it doesn't matter. There's often stories in that genre that involve time travel, for example. So you can mess around with what's going on in the medieval time period, for example, that,
Hmm.
that you couldn't if you were doing the approach that I take, that kind of
Right.
thing.
Wow.
And I really think the idea of writing a small biography for your principal characters is really important, at least
Yeah.
for me. That keeps my head straight, so I know where they're coming from. Based on your education or experience, you have a little different bias to how you look at life, and that helps to define that character as you're writing it or
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. I love it. You've got some other stuff coming out soon. Tell us a little bit about what's on the horizon for you and just how people can connect with you more if they want to get more from you.
Okay, that's fun. I have a completed manuscript that's waiting for the publisher's decision. Uh, that came about in kind of a strange way. In my first novel, The Nazi Menace, I have my antagonist and protagonist meet each other in 1936, and they have a rather explosive relationship.
Mm,
And then I jump forward to 1941, and in the course of my writing, without even thinking about it, because I know that military guys do this, where'd you spend the last few years? And without thinking about it, I have my hero say, "Oh, I spent it in Panama."
mm,
Well, now I've got this time gap. I thought, oh, I think I can create a story that fits in that time gap that accounts for what he was doing.
yeah.
And with that, it's just a basis it took off. And that was the first time, for example, that I had written anything that involved Japanese.
Mm,
So that required a whole new facet of research, and the Panama Canal. And I had the opportunity in 2018 to take a cruise through the canal, which was a really good thing because I found out this part of what I wrote wouldn't work. There's an airfield that's existed there since the early 30s, that's not very far from the canal. And so in my early writings, I had the hero stopping what he's doing and watching the ships. When I went through the canal, I realized there's two large mountains in between. So,
so
oopsie, go
travel.
back.
So what you're saying is writing fiction is a great reason to go on an international trip.
Absolutely.
I just need
Absolutely.
another excuse to go on a trip.
And
I love
the other
it.
thing I love is Google Earth. That saved me from an embarrassing mistake in the second book, Red Menace, because it involved Mongolia, which is not
Mhm.
a place where a lot of people get to go.
No.
And and I had my hero flying in there, and I thought, I don't know what that topography is like at all. And it's a good thing I did, because it's not some flat
No,
plain.
it's
It
pretty
has
mountainous, isn't it?
Yes, it's pretty mountainous, and so I had to route him differently than I would have otherwise, to avoid that. And that adds to the authenticity,
Yeah.
which to me is really important.
Yeah.
I I, I often tell this to writers that are starting, that you want to be very careful that you don't disturb that willing suspension of disbelief that is necessary for somebody to read or watch fiction.
Hmm.
Because if you do something that's wrong, that they know is wrong,
Yeah.
you've lost them and you won't get them back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the trust piece is huge. Well,
Yes.
and I'm seeing it more and more even in nonfiction in today's world with AI.
Oh, yes.
Like if you're trying to represent something as truth, but it's a photo or a video made from AI, and people tell that that's the case, and you haven't explicitly said, "Hey, this graphic was made by AI. This isn't
Mhm.
really me. This is just for fun." People kind of it loses credibility in your book, and it's also
Absolutely.
in our world, authenticity, I think, is going to be just the biggest differentiator for us moving forward in a world where you can create all sorts of stuff that's technically fake. But when someone knows that it's actually me, that's part of why I love video and podcasts is, you can see, You can see the wrinkles and the bags under my eyes. You can see that this is not AI, you know?
Let's don't go there, Valerie.
Well, no, but I do think it's going to be something that becomes like that authenticity, the lack of perfection is actually going to be a bigger importance in our world. And it's something that I personally resonate with. When I see somebody that's perpetuating something as AI or it's too perfect, I start to wonder. And if it's too perfect all the time, then I start to lose trust. So I'm seeing it with my own consumerism of content and books. I think it's only going to become a bigger and bigger thing as we move forward. So it's interesting. You say that on the fiction side, but I'm seeing it on nonfiction side too, that trust is incredibly important as an author. And it's something to be thinking about as you're writing it, but also in how you're marketing and portraying the book as well.
One of the things that I do in my writing, excuse me, I know that I appeal to people like me that are airplane nuts. And so I have deliberately found the most obscure airplane I can find
Uh-huh.
and managed to work it in the story. And it's the kind of thing that I've had people say, you made that up. And then they go research it and say, it's real. I didn't know that. That satisfies me to a degree you can't believe.
Yeah. So you're leaving them little Easter eggs. Have you heard that?
Yes, I've heard that term. Yes,
Yeah, those are
yes.
your little Easter eggs. Fancy, obscure airplane models are your Easter
Yep,
eggs.
yep,
I
yep.
love it. Yeah, that's really fun. I love hearing just your perspective. Not everyone comes from such an extensive background like you do, and not everyone writes the kind of books that you do. So this has been
It's
really,
true.
really fun. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing about your current projects and your process. And I just think this has been so interesting. If people want to get more from you or to go check your books out, where can they best connect with them?
Probably my website, which is just simply jeffkildow.com.
Great. Awesome. Well, you heard it here, folks. JeffKildow.com. If you want to get more from Jeff, you want to connect with him further, you find other Easter eggs in his books that you're curious if it's actually true, you can reach out and connect with him more there. And I encourage you to go check out some of his fiction novels, his alternative history fiction, and go explore some alternative option for how the world could have been and get lost in a good book. So thanks for coming on, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I enjoyed it.